Integration or polarization? Which way to go? The 31st APEC Economic Leaders Meeting will be held on November the 15th and 16th in Peru. Leaders and senior officials from 21 member economies are meeting in its capital, Lima. Chinese President Xi Jinping is set to leave Beijing on Wednesday, which is today, to attend the APEC meeting and also pay a state visit to that country. He will then pay a state visit to Brazil, where he will attend a G20 summit. But our focus today is on APEC. Founded 35 years ago after the end of the Cold War, the group of now 21 Asia-Pacific economies accounts for 60% of the world's economic output and half of world trade. The region has always been an engine of global economic growth and a driver of free trade. But the big question now is, with the election of Donald Trump, what lies ahead? What will be China's messages to this year's APEC meeting, and what are the other members, including host Peru, looking for? Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you live from Beijing. I'm Lu Xin. I'm pleased to be joined from Beijing by Edgar Perez, American-Peruvian business author and keynote speaker on AI and new technologies. From Brisbane, Australia, by Warwick Powell, adjunct professor of Queensland University of Technology. From Kunshan in eastern China's Jiangsu province, Professor John Quelch, executive vice chancellor at Duke Kunshan University. And from Nanjing, also in Jiangsu province, by Niu Haibing, director of the Institute for Foreign Policy Studies at Shanghai Institute for International Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Let's go straight into the topic. It's a very important meeting. As I said, it's founded right after the end of the Cold War. Now, APEC accounts for 60% of world economic output, 49% of world trade. Currently, there are 21 economies. In case you're not very familiar with it, they include China's Hong Kong SAR, Chinese Taipei, Russia, US, Indonesia, Japan, ROK, Mexico, New Zealand, Australia, Papua New Guinea, so on and so forth. And however, there is a big gap in terms of income levels between these different countries. I do want to go to Professor Powell. From the Australian perspective, Australia is one of the founding members. How important is APEC, and how important is this year's APEC?
Well, good to be with you again. APEC, of course, holds a very important place within the Australian foreign policy regime. Of course, as you mentioned, Australia was one of the founding nations for APEC, and I think Australia views APEC as an important part of the global network of multilateral institutions focused on promoting greater economic collaborations and greater economic flows between countries. Certainly, APEC has fulfilled that role to varying degrees of success since its founding, and Australia, as a trading nation in particular, will be looking for opportunities to enhance and consolidate an open global trading environment, and would look to APEC as one of the institutions by which that agenda can be advanced.
Professor Quelch, from America's perspective, of course, the big question is what lies ahead? How important will this grouping be for the upcoming administration? Let's face the elephant in the room.
Last year in San Francisco, President Biden met with President Xi. It was a very significant and fruitful meeting. This year, of course, newly elected President Trump will not be, I think, attending the meeting. We're in a transition in the United States. I think, nevertheless, APEC being a very important multilateral trade and investment institution, the U.S. will be properly represented by the appropriate government officials, civil servants, and in many of the breakout sessions on particular areas of trade and investment, say tourism, for instance, I'm sure there'll be significant conversations that will be very fruitful. But I don't expect to see any significant geopolitical change emerging from this session. I would say one thing, if I may. There are, I think, 6 new prime ministers and presidents who are attending for the first time APEC, and for them it's a very important opportunity to meet with counterparts. I think this is one of the multilateral trade and investment organizations that does bring together the North and the South. And so there is opportunity for North-South dialogue that doesn't necessarily occur at every one of these types of meetings. So behind the scenes and in a low-key way, I expect to see very productive, forward-thinking conversation and some agreements emerging, but nothing of the level of significance that we saw in San Francisco last year.
Mr. Edgar Perez, let me go to you. Central and South American members are also part of the grouping, namely Mexico, Peru, which is your country, and Chile. How important is this upcoming meeting for Central and Latin American countries? Will it kindle greater interest in this grouping from countries in that part of the world?
Absolutely. I think the economy, as you will see in this region, has a very important interrelation with other countries' economies in this group too. For example, in the case of Peru, my native country, our main trading partner is China, and the same applies for other Latin American countries involved in this area. So I think this APEC summit in Peru with the motto, empower, include, and grow, basically means that we have to embrace growth, embrace trade, but also from a sustainable point of view. And that's significant in Peru and also Latin American countries, where some of the economy is actually not formalized, despite the fact that we have many big businesses, big companies. There are also plenty of smaller organizations that are not really part of the formal economy, yet they are also interested in contributing to the rest of the bloc. So I think incorporating their feedback, it's going to be a very important goal for this session of the APEC summit.
Professor Niu, Latin America is geographically very distant from China. It takes a long way to travel there. But President Xi is paying 2 state visits there and attending these 2 meetings in person. How much importance is China putting in that part of the world, and why is he putting so much importance there?
I think in recent decades, Latin America as a whole has been a regional, as a very strategic and important economic partner for China, not only on the term of the trade relationship, but also in terms of the investment and technological cooperation. I think now the economic relationship is getting more balanced and innovative. So I think this state visit to Peru and Brazil is highly expected by the regional countries. In terms of, they are expecting more and more investment go to the strategic sectors of the region, not only on the infrastructure ones, but also on the industrial and innovative sectors. And also they are expecting China play a leading role in revives the multilateral platforms such as APEC and G20.
Well, I have a sense that there is apprehension in the air, exactly for the reason I mentioned earlier, because of the election of the new U.S. president. Warwick, do you sense that too? I mean, China's position or the other members' position are pretty consistent, because they have voiced their concern, and they have put it down on the, for instance, very important consensus they have reached, that they want economic integration, they want more trade, more open trade. Of course, it also talks about fair, non-discriminative and predictable trade. But with the new U.S. administration coming, how much apprehension is there? How much certainty or uncertainty is out there, Warwick?
Well, I think the only thing at the moment that many people feel certain about is that there's going to be a period of uncertainty. And that uncertainty is going to impact the extent to which APEC is able to continue fulfilling part of its original mission, which is to facilitate and to build more open and transparent trading and investment relationships between participant countries. There is no doubt that most of the members of APEC continue to subscribe to the core philosophy, which is that greater economic collaborations through trade and investment and people flows is in the interests of all participants. The outstanding character in all of this now is, of course, the United States. The United States looks like it is heading down a pathway where it increasingly sees itself as being separated from these patterns of global trade and investment integrations, and to some extent, of course, also the movement of people. Time will, of course, tell the extent to which these protectionist inclinations in the United States become locked-in features of the body politic and its policy positions. But I would certainly be of the view that the concerns that countries have about the United States pulling away from global interactions, these concerns are very warranted.
Well, consensus is a key word. The 2024 chair of APEC Senior Officials Ambassador Carlos Vazquez put it this way. He says consensus is APEC's most vital tool and a testimony to our shared responsibility. Professor Quelch, is it likely that this tool will be hanging in the air? Given the predicted uncertainty, what can members do really at this moment?
So I think as far as uncertainty is concerned, obviously we're looking closely at the appointments to the new administration. And I think one significant prospective appointment, not yet announced but widely touted, is that of Senator Marco Rubio of Florida to be the next Secretary of State. Senator Rubio has a hawkish position on China that has been well established. But I think that we should be a little bit cautious about taking all of President-elect Trump's statements at face value. Many of his statements have proven to be, if you like, entry-level negotiation positions that don't necessarily play out in reality. I think one characteristic perhaps of President-elect Trump is that he tends to be, from his experience, a bilateral deal maker. Obviously, we know he's a deal maker, but he tends to like to cut deals bilaterally with another party rather than multilaterally. And my guess is that as we see progressive evidence of where he stands on the issue of global tariffs, we're going to see carve-outs, as we call them in the United States. In other words, exceptions, rules that apply to some but not to everybody, according to what the strategic interests of the United States are perceived by President-elect Trump to be. So consensus, I don't think, is necessarily a driving value for President Trump elect. I think, he is concerned to deliver to the American people, and, that is actually the role of every president or prime minister to do that for the people of his nation. And, President Trump is going to do that in a way that maybe emphasizes less consensus than has traditionally been the case in the Biden administration, for example.
Well, I think we definitely need to let the facts speak for themselves, and I'm going to turn to Professor Liu here. What I do not understand, for instance, over the past 30 years, average tariffs across APEC economies have actually come down from 17%, 17 to 5%. That is the average tariff, and APEC countries have been the engine of economic growth. Actually, they contribute to 70% of the world's economic growth. Does that actually tell us that economic and trade interactions, cooperations actually contribute, and lowering of tariffs over the longer term has been conducive to the welfare of countries in the region, including the United States?
Yes, I do think so. I think that's why the countries are still evaluate the APEC as a platform to facilitate the trade and investment across Asia Pacific. So I think this is still the direction that our economies are working towards. But the main challenge now is from the developed countries' economies. They are trying to adopt the new measure of protectionism. I think, but for the members of countries like Mexico, Vietnam, Peru, and China, they are lowering their tariffs and to do more to facilitate the mutual trade and investment. So I think there are two directions at the same time, but I think the general direction is clear, and the APEC for this year is adopting a very pragmatic method to policy position to promote the cooperation, especially on the inclusive and sustainability growth of the region. So I think that's the biggest consensus.
Mr. Perez, let's come back to Lima, and we have actually been reading a lot here on the Chinese press about a mega port which is about 80 kilometers away from the capital Lima, that's called Chancay, and it's built with China's cooperation, of course, and President Xi is expected to inaugurate this new mega port. What is the significance of this port for Peru and for regional countries? And why is this project so much highlighted? Is there a message there that is meant for not just countries in the global north, but also for countries in the global south?
Absolutely. I think the development of the Chancay Port represents a very significant development in Latin America overall, not only for Peru, but also for neighboring countries in the region. Why so? When you think about the interactions of our economies, obviously China and other Asian economies are very important partners. As of today, if you would like to export from South America, whether it's going to be agricultural products, fishing, or mining products, that's something that is going to take around 40 to 45 days, because most of the ships that can actually come to Peru will need to eventually go to Mexico or the United States to go into the big freight that actually can go across the Pacific Ocean. That takes a long time. Chancay Port will actually have a very important infrastructure change. In this case, we will be allowing big ships, the biggest ships in the world, starting with 16,000 containers all the way to 24,000 containers in the near future. That's a big investment in Peru, and also that means that not only Peru, but also other countries will benefit. Countries will send their ships to Chancay, and then we will actually embrace the trip all the way across the ocean. That's a big development, and that means that economies like Peru will eventually improve. There is talk today that not only with the port, but also with the development of a free trade zone around the port, meaning that companies will be able to operate there with significant benefits, facilitating commerce between Latin America and Asia in the near future.
Well, your president, Mr. Perez, let me stay with you. Your president was in China, President Boluarte. She actually highly praised the kind of opportunities that China and Peru are set to take advantage of. And she welcomed more Chinese investment and more trade with China. Actually, they are looking forward to upgrade their trade relationship. But there are criticism, of course, saying China is, building the port to extract raw material from that part of the world, the kind of rhetoric we have been hearing. What is your personal take? Why is Peru's president looking forward to greater economic interaction instead of saying, give me what I give you in absolute reciprocity?
Well, if you think about Peru and China, obviously there has been a relationship that dates many, many years, and the current president has been interested not only in strengthening the current agreement that exists between Peru and China, but actually updating it. If you have been living under the rock, you probably haven't heard about artificial intelligence. But these type of new technologies and digital economies actually are now bringing new opportunities for our countries. China is a global leader in technology, and that means that countries in South America, not only Peru, will look at China as an opportunity to learn to digitize their economies, to be able to embrace these new opportunities, because at the end of the day, if you look at global growth and APEC growth as well, these new technologies will bring the new wave of growth. If you look at the estimation of economic growth for GDP this year for our economies, in 2023, the growth estimated was 3.4% across APEC member economies. For this year, that growth is potentially coming down a bit to 3.3, meaning that the only opportunity for the economy to continue growing is to embrace technology. And which other country in the world will provide that technology to Latin American country? That might be coming from China, which has a very competitive proposition for our economies.
Warwick, the Chinese president's message will be very much, watched, anticipated for this at this particular juncture, especially. President Xi is expected to lay out some of the key measures China is going to take over the next 5 years in terms of reform. As our previous speaker just talked about, a lot of countries are looking for what China is planning to do in terms of economic and development opportunities for their country. What kind of messages do you think President Xi is going to send, and how do you think countries in the region are probably expecting the kind of certainty or maybe opportunities coming from Chinese growth and reform initiatives?
The fundamental message will focus the fact that we're talking about, we all coexist on the same planet and therefore have the same shared responsibilities and opportunities, and we can only realize those through intensified collaboration and cooperation. I think that that's the first fundamental message that President Xi will deliver at this meeting, which of course is the continuation of a message that President Xi has delivered for a long time now. This has been China's mantra, that the world needs to work at ways of building more bridges that connect people and connect enterprises and places so that they can benefit from each other and through the interactions with each other. China will continue doing that over the next 5 years. The Chinese market will continue its ongoing restructure, and it will provide greater opportunities and openness to exporting countries to access new markets, new customers, and of course also access new technologies. And through that process of interaction, not only create economic growth, but also transform the nature of places by lifting the quality of the people, by creating new green and clean development opportunities, and in the end, raising living standards overall, resulting in a fairer world. And I think they're going to be the key messages that President Xi will seek to impress upon not only the participants, but anyone else watching.
Professor Quelch, do you think Latin American countries or Central and South American countries will face some kind of a dilemma as for a while countries such as Australia found itself in between a rock and a hard place? After all, people call that region the backyard of the United States, and the fact that China is solidifying its partnership with these countries, of course on legitimate legal terms. Do you think there may be this kind of consideration? How do you see countries in that region finding a balance between finding development opportunities vis-a-vis China and, still keeping a reasonably good relationship with North America?
You express it entirely correctly. The United States has often taken its Latin American neighbors for granted, and they should therefore be attempting to balance the level of interests and commitments and investment flows that they have with an important world leader like China, along with the US. It's also true historically that Latin America has not been very well known for IP and for cutting edge technology or innovation. And they therefore do need support from developed nations and or from China to provide the level of technology infrastructure as well as knowledge-based innovation that's necessary to bring digital innovation to their societies, and therefore to sort of leapfrog the analog era, if you like, to embrace digitalization. Brazil has done a fantastic job in its digital banking system, for example, and that should be an example for the rest of Latin America. So I think it's fantastic that China has taken an interest in Latin America. That is in the best interests of all Latin American people. And the United States should be put under a little bit more pressure in terms of not taking its Latin American neighbors for granted. So I applaud President Xi for making the journey to Lima. I think one of the exemplary things about President Xi, if I may say so, is that he is always welcoming foreign heads of state to Beijing. He is always on the road to attend these conferences that other global South countries in particular are attending. And that's what the leadership of China should do.
Thank you. Thank you for that very generous compliment. Finally, let me go to Mr. Niu. Is China getting ready to buckle up with the kind of prospective appointments that are leaking out of Washington? And how strategically patient will China be in facing with these kind of potential shock waves?
Yes, I think China usually had a dialogue with the United States on Latin America affairs. I think maybe in the near future, this kind of trilateral dialogue shall be continued. And also, I think there is a great space for win-win results if the Latin American countries can have better dialogue and collaboration with both the United States and China. Since they have strong, high expectations from these two world major economies, like Mexico's trade volume with the U.S. has surpassed China, but all the countries in Latin America are hoping to have a working, at least, relationship with both super economic powers. So I think both the United States and China can help the Latin American countries to help them to achieve the economic transition by achieving the digitalization and to promote the formalization of their economy, creating more better and qualified jobs for the people.
Thank you so much. We're going to leave it there. Many thanks to Edgar Perez, American Peruvian business author and keynote speaker on AI and new technologies. Warwick Powell, adjunct professor at Queensland University of Technology. Professor John Quelch, executive vice chancellor at Duke Kunshan University. And Niu Haibing, director of the Institute for Foreign Policy Studies at Shanghai Institutes for International Studies. With that, we come to the end of this special edition of The Point with me, Li Xin, coming to you live from Beijing. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and X using the handle Li Xin in Beijing. On behalf of the whole team, thanks for watching. You've got The Point.